There is a silence that follows hatred. Not the silence of peace, but the silence after fire. The kind that clings to the air, long after the voices have gone quiet, long after the walls have fallen. It isn't calm, it isn't relief, it isn't forgiveness. It is the stillness that arrives when the world has made its judgment, and you are no longer trying to explain yourself. He walks through what once was a home, not of bricks and wood, but of identity, belonging, acceptance. It has all collapsed. He tried to be understood, to explain, to defend, to soften his edges so they could hold him without fear. But every word twisted. Every step forward became ammunition for another accusation. Too cold, too intense, too much. In a world that worships the herd, the one who walks alone is never seen, only feared. The mirror maze begins innocently. You look into the glass and hope to see yourself, but the reflections are not yours. They belong to others. Every insult etched like frost across the glass. One mirror shows you arrogant, another, selfish, another, monstrous. The longer you stare, the less you recognize your face. The persona fractures. And you begin to doubt. Maybe I am what they say. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should return to the mask. But the more you try to fit their image, the more grotesque the mirror becomes. Until finally, you stop. No more arguing, no more defending. No more pretending to be understandable. And in that surrender comes something unexpected. Not noise, not rage, not applause, silence, not the silence of exile, but the silence of awakening. A stillness where something long buried rises from the deep. Your voice, not loud, not proud, but whole. And then you realize something terrible, freeing. They never hated you. They hated what you reminded them of. Their forgotten truths, their buried desires, their unlived lives. You didn't offend them with your cruelty. You disturbed them with your authenticity. Because to stand alone is to show others that they too could have chosen differently. Nietzsche warned of the herd, the comfort of the collective, where thinking is outsourced and morality is inherited. To step beyond the herd is to walk into the abyss, and the abyss does not lie. It reflects nothing but what you are. If you are empty, you will fall. But if you are whole, you will see stars in the blackness. Schopenhauer said that solitude is the fate of the awakened, but it is not a punishment. It is a temple. When the noise is gone, when the applause ends, when the mirrors break, you begin to hear yourself. And what you hear is not desperate. It is clear, calm, real. Let them hate. Let them misunderstand. You are not here to be worshipped, or liked, or praised. You are here to become. And becoming is rarely applauded by those who have not yet begun. Let the silence grow. Let the masks fall. Let the false mirrors shatter. And when they do, walk on. Not in spite of the hatred, but because of it. Say the first betrayal comes from the outside. A friend's lie, a lover's silence, a stranger's scorn. But that's not true. The first betrayal is the moment you realize you've been betraying yourself just to be liked. It happens quietly, room full of laughter. You laugh too, but don't feel it. A conversation, you nod, though every word feels foreign. Compliment. You smile, but feel nothing inside. And slowly, something inside you dies, not all at once, but piece by piece. Polite, acceptable, pleasant, like cattle moving in unison. We're taught that harmony is holiness, that sameness is safety. Blend and smile, agree, be like them, or be alone. This is the morality of the herd, as Nietzsche saw it. Not a moral code born from truth, but a survival instinct born from fear. Not strength, but trembling obedience. Because to be different is to become dangerous. There is a ballroom in the unconscious, a grand hall lit with gold chandeliers, music flowing like warm honey, and hundreds of dancers moving in perfect rhythm. Each wears a mask, not ugly, elegant, beautiful, ornate. Carved smiles, blushed cheeks, painted calm. No one speaks of their pain. No one breaks the pattern. And above them, a single rule hangs like a chandelier of glass. Do not remove your mask. It's not here. Not ever. But something itches underneath. Not on the face, but deeper on the soul. a desire to breathe, stop performing, to step out of the rhythm and simply be. So one day you do. You reach for the mask and lift. The music stops. The dancers freeze mid-step. The chandeliers flicker. Their eyes turn toward you, not in awe, but in horror. You've broken the spell. You've disturbed the dream. You are now a threat. The crowd doesn't hate you because you've changed. They hate you because your change reminds them of their own chains. They've spent their lives perfecting the mask, believing it was their face. Now your bare skin exposes their falseness. Your courage insults them. Jung called this mask the persona, a necessary fiction to survive society. But wear it too long, and you forget there's someone beneath it. The mask becomes your memory, your reflection, your truth. And so when you remove it, they don't say, "Ah, there you are." They say, "What is that? Who do you think you are? You've changed," as if changing were a crime. To peel away the persona is to expose what Jung called the shadow, the unacceptable self buried in silence. It is not evil, it is simply real. And reality, in a room built on illusion, is blasphemy. You become offensive not by doing wrong, but by being real. You become hated not for being wicked, but for no longer being willing to play along. Schopenhauer warned that truth is not welcome here, not in a world numbed by comfort and addicted to distraction. The truth hurts, not because it's cruel, but because it is awake. And those who speak it, whether with words or silence or mere presence, become lightning rods for the herd's fear. You didn't shout, you didn't attack, simply stood still while everyone else danced. And that, to them, was unforgivable. Kierkegaard said that the crowd is untruth. When many gather, truth becomes thin, diluted by compromise, softened into convenience. The crowd protects itself from the terror of inwardness, that sacred solitude where one confronts the self without mask or mirror. But those who walk away from the crowd, who dive into the paradox of becoming, who embrace despair as a birth canal, they are not understood. They are mocked, feared, hated, because they are free. And nothing disturbs the imprisoned like the sight of someone who has broken their chains. Alan Watts reminded us that the ego is an illusion, a trick of perception, a boundary drawn in sand. The masks we wear, the opinions we hold, the applause we seek, they are all part of the dream. To awaken is to see that you were never just a role. You were the one playing it. And once you see it, you can never unsee. And once you step out, you will never belong again. Not fully, not comfortably, but honestly. They will call you names: cold, arrogant, selfish. But listen closely. These are not descriptions. They are confessions. What they fear in you is what they have abandoned in themselves. They don't hate you. They hate the reminder. You are not being punished for who you are. You are being punished for no longer being who they need you to be. Let them look. Let them whisper. Let them turn. You've left the ballroom. You've dropped the mask. And outside, there is no music. Only wind. But it is real. And for the first time, so are you. There comes a moment when the noise of the world fades. Not by choice, but by consequence. You stop being who they wanted, and they stop looking back. What follows is not silence, but exile. And so, you begin to walk. The path behind you has turned to ash. Every bridge you once stood on burns with the memory of compromise. No signs remain. No names. No hands reaching out. Only fog. Only stillness. Only the crunch of your own footsteps on soil no one else dares to tread. This is not loneliness. Think. This is solitude. And solitude is not a void. It is a womb. It does not echo with absence. It cradles the birth of something raw, unfinished, real. Imagine a forest untouched by light. The branches twist like questions with no answers. Mist hangs like unspoken thoughts. And deeper in, even time begins to forget itself. You are not lost. You are descending. Downward, inward. Away from the surface where masks are currency and mirrors lie. This descent is not a fall from grace. It is a return to gravity. You are being pulled not by despair, but by truth. Schopenhauer knew this silence well. He said the awakened mind will always find itself alone, not because it chooses to hate, but because it can no longer pretend. The world thrives on shared illusions, agreements, unspoken rituals of denial. But once you see the fabric fray, once you watch the actors forget their lines, you cannot go back. And so you walk deeper into the ache of honesty. Jung called it individuation, the sacred disconnection from the collective trance, the unraveling of all you've borrowed, the names, the roles, the expectations. To become oneself is not to find new answers. It is to face old ghosts, and they wait for you in the forest, the buried truth, the shadow, not evil, not wicked, just repressed. It carries your anger, your shame, your power, your wildness, all the parts you were told to exile in order to be loved. And now, in the dark, they rise. You meet them one by one, not as enemies, but as orphans. You recognize their eyes, you feel their hunger. They are not trying to destroy you. They want to return to you. But to reclaim them is to burn the lies that kept you tame. And fire, no matter how sacred, still hurts. This is the price of becoming. Descend is to die to who you were before the world hated you. To walk into the fog without promise of light. To sit with yourself when no one else stays. It's not out of pride, but necessity. Because to return to the crowd would now be betrayal. It's not of them, but of your soul. Nietzsche spoke of the abyss. Here you see it. That is a place of doom, but of reflection. You look into it, and it looks back, but it does not mock. It does not judge. It simply waits to see if you will flinch, if you will retreat, if you will call this sacred solitude a mistake, or if you will remain, not as a visitor, but as one who belongs. Kierkegaard whispered that inwardness is the beginning of faith, that despair is not our enemy, but our initiation. Here, in this forest of silence, you feel it. The paradox. You feel most empty, yet closest to truth. You feel most broken, yet nearest to wholeness. Because for the first time, you are not living for their applause or their permission. You are not sculpting yourself to be seen. You are simply becoming. Alan Watts would remind you, the self you thought you were was always an illusion, a ripple mistaken for the sea. And here, in the stillness of exile, you feel it dissolve. The performance fades, the script falls away. What remains is not a role, but a presence. You, not the you they remember, not the you they wanted. It's the quiet flame beneath it all. So walk, even if no one sees, even if no one follows. Let the fog cover your footprints. Let the silence echo in your chest. You are not being erased or being rewritten from the marrow. They will call you lost. They will say you've changed. But in truth, you are returning, not to them, but to yourself. This is the descent. It is painful. It is slow. But it is holy. And those who have been hated often find that in the dark, their vision sharpens. Not outward, but inward. The self is no longer shaped by flattery or fear. It's forged by fire. There comes a silence so deep it begins to whisper. It's not with words, but with reflections. You do not find yourself all at once. You lose yourself first. And in that loss, something begins to shift. Picture a long corridor, lit by candlelight, still breathing with shadows. Along the walls, mirrors, each one catching your image from a different angle. You begin to walk, slowly, carefully. At first you see what you've always seen, the curated self, the polished face, the practiced posture of someone who learned long ago what they were supposed to be. But then, the images begin to ripple. One mirror shows you weak, cowering, ashamed. Another, cold-eyed, cruel, capable of things you swore you would never do. Another, small, insignificant, a forgotten echo in a crowded room. These are not you, but they are the you others saw when they could not see clearly. Their projections, their judgments, their wounds cast upon your reflection like stains, and for years you carried them, believed them, protected them as if they were pieces of truth, but they were never yours. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world, useful, perhaps necessary at times. But deadly when we forget it is a mask. When we think the mask is who we are, this hall of mirrors is not a dream, it is the inside of your psyche, and the candlelight is dimming. You stop in front of one mirror. It is older than the rest, less decorated, dusty, unassuming. You've passed it before, without pause. But tonight, something pulls you toward it. You stare. What you see is not grotesque, not saintly, not monstrous, just empty. A void where a self should be, and you feel it. A crack. Thin at first, barely visible, then deeper, spreading like lightning across glass. You reach out to stop it, to hold the image together, but it shatters beneath your touch. Not with violence, but with inevitability. Like a truth you've always known but never dared to speak. This is the breaking point, not of the world, of you. The moment you realize the self you've protected, defended, polished for acceptance was never real. It was scaffolding, a placeholder, a ghost designed to be loved. But it is not love to be adored as someone you're not. Kierkegaard called this the sickness unto death, despair. Not from being hated, but from being unknown. It's not from exile, but from imitation. We spend our lives trying to be palatable, presentable, praiseworthy. In doing so, we become strangers to our own soul. Until one day, the image cracks. We are left with nothing but ourselves. You stand now in the broken light of 100 mirrors. Some still show fragments, others only dust. But one mirror remains, not reflective, but transparent. It does not show you, it shows through you. No distortions, no angles, no adornment, just the truth you've been running from. And it is here you must decide. To rebuild the illusion, or to walk away without a mask. To let the world love a fiction, or to be hated for what is real. Because there is a kind of peace only found in defiance. Not loud, not cruel, just sacred. A refusal to live someone else's dream. Nietzsche warned that the herd despises the one who walks alone. Not because he is evil, but because he reminds them that freedom is possible, and freedom is terrifying. The Bermensch does not rise by being more loved. He rises by being unchained, by letting the mirror break, by standing in the shards and saying, "This is me, not perfect, not pure, but real." Schopenhauer whispered that suffering is the birthplace of wisdom. And here, in the echo of broken glass, you understand. It hurts to lose your identity. But it hurts more to keep wearing what was never yours. Alan Watts would say the self was always an illusion, that what we are is not a thing, but a process. Not a name, but a presence. And as the last mirror fades, you feel it. The stillness, not emptiness, not numbness, but peace. Not because you have found the perfect self, but because you've stopped chasing one. Let the mirrors fall. Let the dust rise. You are not the image. You are the light behind it. You are not what they see. You are what sees, and that is enough. There comes a moment after the mirrors shatter, when everything becomes quiet, not peaceful, not calm, but terrifyingly still. The performance has ended. The mask lies broken. The mirrors no longer lie. And now the ego begins to scream. Picture a man standing alone on the edge of a cliff, his feet pressed into crumbling stone, the wind howling around him. Behind him, the ruins of 1,000 selves. Before him, the abyss, black, endless, silent. It does not speak. It watches. And as Nietzsche warned, it watches you back. The man trembles. Not from the cold, but from the unraveling. The ego clings, like a child begging not to be left behind. "I am your pride," it cries. "I am your name, your story, your worth. If you let go of me, you will vanish." But another voice stirs, not loud but ancient. A whisper not from the head, but from somewhere far beneath the chest. And it says, "No, you will emerge." Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the path to wholeness not through perfection, but through integration. But integration requires collapse, the death of the persona, the mourning of the ideal self. The ego doesn't go quietly, it claws. It bargains, it begs, it wants applause, it wants revenge. It wants to be seen as important. But the abyss offers no validation, no stage, no audience. Only depth. Alan Watts once said that the ego is an illusion, a hallucination of separateness, a trick of consciousness that makes you believe you are something apart from the world, rather than of it. And so, when others reject you, when the herd mocks you, when the world turns its back on your identity, it feels like death. But what is dying is not you. It is the illusion you mistook for yourself. Imagine the man taking one step closer to the cliff's edge. The wind sharpens, time slows. The ego cries, "Don't do this. I'll forget you. You'll become nothing." But the whisper within has grown steady. It speaks not with fear, but with knowing. Because what lies beyond the ego is not emptiness, but presence. Not fame, not image, not legacy, but being. Schopenhauer believed that suffering is woven into existence, but that silence and solitude can reveal what lies beneath it. The ego hates silence. It fills it with noise, plans, titles, memories, defenses. But in the collapse, in the stillness that follows, something different appears. Not a new identity, but the absence of needing one. Not a stronger self, but a freer one. The man stares into the abyss. There is no bridge, no sign, no promise. Only the vast unknown. And yet, for the first time, he does not resist. He lets the scream of the ego wash through him like a storm passing through a hollow mountain. And when it is done, he is still there, breathing, but lighter. The herd still chants from afar, still points, still judges. But their voices are distant now, like echoes in a foreign dream, because once the ego collapses, judgment cannot touch you. You do not shrink, you do not rage, you do not explain, you simply are. Kierkegaard called it despair when we live as someone we are not. But this moment, this standing at the edge, unmasked, unnamed, is not despair. It is clarity. It's not the clarity of knowledge, but of surrender. A surrender not to defeat, but to truth. The ego warned you would vanish, but you didn't. You fell through the illusion and landed in what had always been real. Not identity, not importance, but awareness. And so the man, no longer clinging, steps forward. Not into death, but into life without armor. No mask, no script, no fear, only silence, only breath, only being. To let the ego collapse is not self-destruction, it is self-transcendence. The fire that burns away what is false does not harm what is true. What remains cannot be named, it cannot be seen. But it is free, and freedom, as Nietzsche knew, does not come without cost. It demands everything unreal, so that what is real can finally emerge. The silence after fire. There is a silence that follows ruin, not the kind that punishes, but the kind that frees. Not the silence of exile, but the silence of return. Return to something that was always waiting beneath the noise. You walk alone now, not ahead of the crowd, not behind it, but away from it. No longer rushing, no longer defending, no longer looking back to see who follows. The road is empty, but not hollow. It is sacred, because for the first time, you are not walking to be seen. You are walking to be, imagine, ancient ruins beneath a gray sky. Once these stones were temples, once these arches sang with praise, statues stood tall, banners waved. Now, all that is gone, crumbled, ashen, still, but peer closer, and you'll see. From the cracks in the stone, green vines push through, soft shoots curve upward toward a pale morning light. This, too, is you. The collapse was not an end. It was the clearing for something honest to grow. Schopenhauer believed that suffering purifies, that the fire we so often flee is what burns away the layers we mistook for truth. What remains is raw, naked, but real. You no longer crave their applause, because you have seen how quickly it turns to smoke. You no longer shrink from their hatred, because you have walked through the fire it lit and emerged whole. There is a strange peace in not needing to be liked, not because you are bitter, but because you are free. Free from the endless shape-shifting of persona. Carl Jung called it integration. The moment when the shadow is no longer hidden in the basement of the soul, but brought into the light and embraced as part of you. We're no longer torn between the mask you wear and the face beneath. There is no public self, no private self. There is only self. You sit now among the ruins. There is no throne, no stage. There's no need for one, because power, real power, is not how loudly you speak, but how deeply you sit in silence. There is nothing left to prove, no one left to convince, only stillness. Alan Watts said that the ego is a hallucination, a trick of perception that convinces you you are a separate wave and not the ocean. But in the fire, the wave evaporates. What's left is not a void, but the water you've always been. When you stop grasping at being someone, you realize you were never separate to begin with. Let them talk. Let them hate. You no longer answer to their stories about you, because you've stopped telling one yourself. There's no me to defend, no image to polish. You've tasted the silence beyond their noise. And once you do, once that stillness touches your bones, you will never beg for their approval again. Kierkegaard called it the leap. To leave behind the crowd's comfort and face the inward paradox, that only by surrendering everything can you find something eternal. But what you find is not an idea, not a belief, not even hope. What you find is presence. And presence does not need an audience. Look again at the ruins. They do not grieve. They simply exist, unashamed of their cracks, unbothered by their silence. They do not need to be restored. They are beautiful in collapse, and life still finds them always. A bird nesting in the broken arch, a vine claiming the altar, sunlight painting gold across ancient dust. This is the truth they never told you. You do not need to be whole to be complete. You rise, you walk again. But it is different now. You're not chasing, you are not running. You're simply moving. Not toward applause, but toward peace. Not ahead of the herd, but away from it. There is no map. There is no need. Silence is enough. Let them hate. Let them misunderstand. Let them write stories in your absence. None of it matters. Because now you've met the part of you that doesn't need to be explained. And that part is the only one that was ever real. The return of the stranger you return, but not to be embraced. Not to reclaim what was lost. Not to explain where you've been. You return. Like the tide returns to shore. Inevitable, silent, and entirely its own. You are a stranger now, not because you don't belong yet, but because you no longer need to. Imagine a city square, the hum of 1,000 voices, the flutter of coats, the static of conversations that mean nothing and repeat endlessly. People pass by, eyes glazed, smiles timed, gestures learned. A performance so seamless, they forget they are acting. You move through it, slow, still like a shadow gliding through a theater after the play is done. You do not push against them. You do not shout. You do not correct. You see the fear behind the laughter, the hunger behind the postures, the exhaustion behind the masks. You walk among them, not above, not beneath, but beyond. Kierkegaard wrote, "Truth is subjectivity." And now you understand. Truth is not in the crowd's approval. It is not in what is trending, what is praised, what is echoed. Truth is not an outer demand, but an inward fire. A fire that does not burn to destroy, but to illuminate. Your actions rise not from what they want, but from what you are. You live now from the core, from the source. From the still point deep beneath the noise, they stare, they whisper. Some turn their faces, others laugh too loudly. You disturb them. Not with violence, but with stillness. Your presence reminds them of everything they've abandoned. Their eyes flicker with something ancient, a recognition, a discomfort, a longing. They don't know what you are, but they know they used to be it. You are not better. You are simply free. You have crossed the abyss Nietzsche warned of. And now, the herd looks smaller, not because it has changed, but because you have. You have stopped asking for their permission to exist, and in doing so, you unsettle the order they cling to. There is a loneliness in awakening, but it is not emptiness. It is space. It's a kind of space that allows the soul to breathe. The solitude Schopenhauer described, not as punishment, but as power. To be with yourself fully and not flinch. To walk without echo and not despair. To no longer require mirrors to know you are real. In the crowd, you pass windows, glass panels reflecting your shape among theirs. But something is different. The reflections are blurred. Outlines held together by threads of approval. Yours is clear, solid, still whole. You are no longer split between who you are and who you show. This is individuation, as Jung described it. The reunion of self and shadow. It's no longer exiled from your own truth. No longer fractured by performance. You do not need the world to complete your image, because you are no longer an image. You are, Alan Watts said, The self is not something one finds. It is something one becomes, and you have become by letting go. Letting go of the script, of the mask, the endless need to be understood. Now you carry silence like armor. Now you carry stillness like fire. They will hate you, not because you harmed them, but because you refused to join the dance, because you chose truth over choreography, because you dared to stand still while they spun. To be hated by the world is not a failure. It is often the only sign that you are free, that you have stepped beyond the edge of collective sleep, that you are living from soul, not from script. Or let them whisper. Let them explain you to themselves. Let them build a safer version of you in their heads. You are not here to be liked. You're here to be whole. In time, your presence will linger, not as noise, but as a question. A question that haunts those who watch you leave. What if I stopped pretending? What if I chose my truth over their rules? What if I became real? You vanish into the fog. No exit. No applause. No explanation. Just the steady rhythm of footsteps that do not hesitate. You are not running. You are returning. To yourself, to the real, to the place you never truly left, only forgot. Let them hate. You carry something far heavier than their approval. You carry your soul. They will never understand, and that's okay. They stare, but they do not see. They nod, but they do not understand. And for the first time, that no longer breaks you. You walk among them now, not with arrogance, but with a quiet knowing, silence inside you that no longer begs to be translated. Once you tried to explain, you reached for metaphors, peeled back your soul like a page, thinking that if you were honest enough, raw enough, they would finally meet you in the place beyond masks. But they couldn't. Not because they were cruel, but because they were afraid. Most people are not searching for truth. They're searching for comfort. For a face that mirrors theirs. For a voice that echoes their beliefs. When you no longer play that role, you become unsettling. Not because you are false, but because you are real. They called it distance. You called it growth. They called it rebellion. You called it remembering. There is a loneliness in awakening. A silence that deepens when you see how much of the world still lives asleep. But that silence is not empty. It is sacred. It is the sound of a soul no longer performing. Jung wrote that individuation requires separation, not as an act of isolation, but of becoming whole. Nietzsche called it walking the lonely path beyond the herd, where you do not follow, and you are not followed, but you walk, because your soul commands it. You do not need to be understood to be at peace. You do not need to be accepted to be whole. There are moments when they will mock you, project onto you, dismiss you. But even this, now, feels quiet, like leaves rustling in a faraway field, a sound that no longer reaches your core. Because the moment you stop needing to be understood, you become free. Free to think without their approval, free to speak without apology, free to stand still while the world rushes past, chasing illusions. You smile, not because you are above them, but because you have returned to yourself. Let them misunderstand. Let them twist your story into something smaller. You were never here to be explained. You were here to become.